What are the biggest challenges that you think law firms face when it comes to hiring and retaining top talent?
For me, it's all about culture. If you can set up a culture where people feel they can bring things that'll probably upset the partners because it's an important problem that needs solved. If people feel they can have an opportunity for growth and you genuinely give them that spot and they feel heard.
Hey everyone, Bo Royal here, CEO of Pareto Legal, a digital marketing agency that helps injury lawyers scale with digital strategy, online advertising, and analytics. You're listening to the Pareto Legal Podcast, where we feature world-class attorneys, entrepreneurs, and legal experts. And today I'm joined by Ethen Ostroff, founder and CEO of Ethen Ostroff Law. Ethen is a personal injury attorney, entrepreneur, and legal innovator dedicated to fighting for justice while revolutionizing how law firms operate. Beyond his law firm, he leads Attorney Assistant and Turnkey Ops, two companies that help law firms and businesses scale through virtual assistance and operational efficiency. Today, we're diving into legal hiring, outsourcing law firm roles to offshore talent, and how law firms can leverage VAs and AI to streamline operations and maximize profitability. All right, Ethen. So you're a serial entrepreneur that's built companies that blend law, operations, staffing and recruiting, and technology. What led you to such a multifaceted career?
Sure. So, it goes back to when I was, just exiting law school and sort of saw the opportunity to brand yourself as a service as very unique to the legal industry. And I was fascinated by it. In law school, bought all variations of my name. Yes, my name is spelled E-T-H-E-N, so it's a little confusing. So I own enostrofflaw.com, anostrofflaw.com, and I also was very fascinated by sort of the back-end process of how cases flow through a system. Also in law school, I bought the domains casereferralnetwork.com and was fascinated with the referral model. But it was really like when I first started practicing, I was in practice with my dad, like a lot of sons of or daughters of attorneys. And I just felt like the way that we were doing things on a day in and day out basis was costing our clients time and it cost our business resources. And at the end of the day, our clients were suffering when we weren't as efficient as we could be. So, little things like making sure we call our clients every 30 days weren't happening because our paralegals and our case managers were responsible for spillover reception and labeling incoming documents and, getting police reports or child support liens. And I was like, why are they doing that when all that matters is talking to our clients as much as possible? So it was really in the kind of doing it myself where I started to see inefficiencies that hurt our clients. And I felt like it was my obligation to make it better. And that's kind of where, the staffing company started. And that's where my, firm started.
So would you say you're an accidental entrepreneur in some ways? Like it seems like you learned this through osmosis just by being around, your father, growing up around his firm and then being put in those situations. Is that a fair label for you?
I think I was always an entrepreneur. Going back to my college days, I was the one that would sell team swag for our, sports games. And, I always kind of liked the idea of hustling and generating money. Honestly, it was just like a fun game to me. So I feel like I was always sort of born for it, but also in how I'm currently operating in running a law firm, functionally two staffing companies, and we're starting another company in the very near future. I do feel like I wouldn't be able to balance all those things if I didn't delegate well and have a business based around making people more efficient. So, I don't think I was accidental. I think I always kind of had it in me, even back to my elementary school days collecting Pokemon cards and sports cards. I always kind of had a fascination for entrepreneurship. I just didn't know how it would manifest as I, grew up.
You've been working in the legal industry now for what, almost 15 years? Is that
a lot less than that, actually. So I'm 32 years old. I have been an attorney in April. I believe it's now 6 years. Yeah. So I passed the bar in 2018. Yeah. In 2018, I took the bar in July 2018.
What are the biggest challenges that you think law firms face when it comes to hiring and retaining top talent?
Great question. I think those are fundamental questions that law firms need to look themselves in the mirror about. And for me, it's all about culture. If you can set up a culture where people feel they can bring things that'll probably upset the partners because it's an important problem that needs solved. If people feel they can have an opportunity for growth and you genuinely give them that spot and they feel heard, there's hiring, which is finding somebody who has the, culture and mindset and attitude and effort that they're going to show up on time and work really hard when they're there and do what they should and feel like they tried their best. And then there's the retaining, which I think is all the culture. I've seen law firms that my staffing company have failed with where we're the same exact person. We say, hey, maybe it didn't work out with this client. Why don't we try them in this other culture? And then they thrive. So, I think sometimes people get stuck on, well, I only have, people these days that don't work as hard as I did or whatever. I think that's just a law firm not willing to look in the mirror and say, how can I grow? How can I make my people happier? How can I give them what they want? And that's where retaining really works. And we started my businesses in January 2022. We have functionally lost people because we've let people go, but we have about 130 people across my law firm and across my staffing companies. And we really haven't lost anyone we didn't want to lose. There was one person and then they came back like 6 months later. So, in our growth to about 130, it's giving people that real opportunity and also firing people who aren't the right fit and don't work as hard as they should. Because if you don't fire that person, then your A players build resentment towards that person and they think you tolerate bullshit. So, for me, it's a combination of culture building, kind of pulling out the weeds when necessary, and, hiring on attitude and effort.
You touched on some things. First off, I think a lot of lawyers, law firm owners struggle from making that leap to just like having a small practice to actually becoming a business owner. Like everything you just talked about is really things that are working on the law firm, not in the law firm.
That's right.
Right. And I think as you start to become more of an owner, you need to figure out what roles in your company, basically that you're going to fire yourself from and who you need to bring in to take that work, right? How do you recommend that law firms figure out which role should be outsourced versus kept in-house?
That's a really great question. So for me to philosophically approach this question, I believe there are 4 core categories in any law firm. Category 1 is what I call the essentials. Category 2 is what I call the sophisticated. Category 3 is what I call the brain surgery. And then imagine those 3 are column 1 essential, column 2 sophisticated, column 3 brain surgeon. I actually have this graphic if you want it. And then above those 3 categories is architect. The CEO of a law firm, we went to law school to learn how to be attorneys. Attorneys, in my mind, are in that brain surgery category. It's like if I call a hospital, I won't get a brain surgeon on the phone if I ask for it. So why am I able to get you on the phone if I ask for you at any random law firm? So first, it's categorizing yourself as the architect. Because if you are not building mousetraps, you are on a mousetrap. And your role as the architect is to name all those ongoing wheels going on in your business and say, okay, you own this thing, you own that thing, you own this thing, you own that thing. And as long as everyone knows what they own, That's where the clarity starts to come in. It's not, one person wears 55 hats. So where do you start with efficiency? I would first look at all the tasks for you to handle a case. You need to name each of those ongoing tasks for you to move a case from, opening a lead in your system all the way through the client signing the distribution sheet and getting your settlement check. Every one of those things, you need to say that is essential, sophisticated, or brain surgery. If it's a brain surgery task like taking a depo or showing up to trial or running a mediation or, approving discovery, signing on pleadings, brain surgery. Okay, great. You got lawyers for that. That's all they do. But if your lawyers are stuck reducing liens or getting child support liens or getting a police report requested or getting medical records, you're then taking your probably $100 to $125 an hour at cost employee and giving them $11 an hour work. So the worst case scenario is, where is there essential works on your brain surgeons? That's code red. And essentials on your sophisticated, which is really your paralegals. Your paralegals are your sophisticated people. Complicated client escalation, irate client, final draft of discovery to propound, written motions that really a lawyer is going to have to do the final look on. That's what you hire paralegals for. That's what they went to school for. That's your sophisticated. So if your paralegals are doing, night, weekend, outbound intake follow-up, or labeling the incoming mail, or getting medical records, or doing something that is in the essential bucket, that's a big problem, but it's not as bad as where do you start? Where you start is, what is an essential thing that a brain surgeon's doing right now? That's where you start and think, okay, this is the thing I got to peel off on, like, qualifying leads. Let's say that you run a comp firm or even as sophisticated as a med mal firm. Is this worth our further time or not? First name, last name, phone number, basics of the description. What are my injuries? Okay, let me put you on hold. If it's a med mal, we need attorney approval. Then the attorney maybe doing intakes is then sort of last eyes on a finished qualified lead. So there's ways you can start to get your team out of it, but where you start is, where am I the most behind? And what is essential, consistent, repetitive that should not be on someone higher paid's plate?
I love that explanation. I'm more familiar with the $5, $50 an hour, $500 an hour, and $5,000 an hour, a quadrant, like, or way of grouping that work. But I think the way that you describe it makes a lot of sense for lawyers specifically, because the thing that it drives home is, if you have attorneys, if you're paying attorneys, they need to be doing work that only attorneys can do, not this menial BS where they're, chasing leads. Like, where do you think lawyers, by the way, I'm curious for your take on this, where do you think they fall in terms of intake? Like, should they be involved with intake?
So it depends on the state, first off, because in some states, you have to have lawyers talk to a client before they sign a contingency fee. So there are some states like Arizona and a few others that permit that. There are workarounds to it, like client must watch a Loom video of an attorney speaking through the contract and say, I understand, or I want to talk to a lawyer again. Should they be involved in it? In my opinion, I think that it depends on the practice area you handle. There's a big difference to me on, should I sign this case or should I keep this case? And the sales part of me is convert as fast as possible. Don't let them off the phone unless they are your client and gave us a Google review. So for us, we have built specific protocol of signing. Like, for example, rear end accident and this many injuries or more, or this close to the date of incident. That's one classic one. If you run an auto firm and you do both comp and you do personal injury like my firm does, and you get a delivery driver rear-ended and they broke their right arm, just sign them up on both sides. Why does a lawyer need to be involved there? But I think there's a fair argument in the med mal or complicated products side of it, where, the case is much more sophisticated and, the lawyer, I think, should determine whether you keep the case. But you can, in my opinion, as long as your letters are clean and as long as you are not tight on statute, I think it's very low risk to sign a client under an investigation status and, explainer to the client just to get them signed to your contingency fee. Vet it in that first 15 to 30 days thoroughly on the are we going to keep it side of it, and then make that decision when they aren't a flight risk. That's my personal approach. And I don't think we've had any problems with that approach. So
I think there's a lot of lawyers out there, and I know some of them that are very hesitant about that approach, given that there's a risk of, there's consequences that could arise with the reputation, right? If they're not, handed off well or after that investigative stage and you determine that there's not a case there, you've gotten their hopes up and only to basically say, we're not going to work with you. How do you navigate that?
Two things to counter that, in my opinion, big misconception. Okay. Number one, how fast from signed to onboarded is that process? If you don't trust that process and you are not opening and onboarding cases within 5 business days of them getting signed up, and let's say it's 40 days or 45, yeah, you should be worried about taking that strategy, but that should be not 40 to 45 because those first 5 business days in, for example, a premises case can make or break whether you get spoliation letters sent properly or not. So my honest answer to that is tighten the ship on your first 45 days. And then let's talk second part on the reputation side. The perfect Google review is 4.9. Bo, you can put a link to my law firm's Google reviews. We have over 2,200 Google reviews. We've gotten almost all of those at intake, where we clearly up until September 2024, I didn't even handle people's cases. I would refer them all out. And we were still able to get that many Google reviews by just saying, hey, this is our part of the job. We are now passing you off to them. Do you feel like we did a good job? So start asking for more Google reviews when you do get a win with a client who is happy earlier in the process. And that will significantly overshadow the potential of the 1 out of 50 1-star Google reviews you get if you're getting hundreds of Google reviews like we are. So in my opinion, those two things you just described, the reputation and the case setup, are operational, solvable things that should not be a factor in what we're talking about.
I love that. Just real quick follow-up, a couple quick things. Are you, with your intake folks, are you holding them accountable to getting Google reviews and more specifically giving them incentives based on Google reviews? Yeah.
Yeah. So we pay both an individual and team bonus every month to anyone who gets any Google review. So anytime anyone gets it, everyone wins. Anytime an individual gets it, they win.
And then are you keeping intake involved with I don't know how you'd label them. I guess they are a client if they're under an investigative stage. Are they involved with communication?
No, they hand off to what we have on our, that's the only real handoff process we have. So we have 3 roles on our cases on every open case. We have an attorney role, a paralegal role, who is a certified paralegal or a overseen certified paralegal, and what I call a scheduler. The scheduler is an invented role that I created where it is functionally the executive assistant to the client. Their job is to make sure they get onboarded fast. Their job is to make sure if they have questions about treatment that we coordinate it. Their job is to make sure they show up to things. Through litigation, they deal with the litigation scheduling and making sure the client has access to the attorney if they want to book calls with the attorney. They're really just a scheduler of the client. And that role makes us not have a gap when we sign a case to opening a case. That's how we approached it. And then on the back end, we have a role called the filer, which is broken out into multiple departments: medical record retrieval, consistent repetitive template docs, settlement documents that need to be signed, really anything in the background that the client never needs to talk to someone for. the filing department does for our open cases. So that's sort of where we took like the consistent, repetitive document labeling, grabbing this email, making sure it's saved to the file, whatever on the open cases that is behind the scenes, not interacting with the client themselves, getting, insurance companies on notice, getting a deck page, getting a police report, getting a child support lien. We sort of have one task roles on the filing department for that.
I love these answers. It basically conveys to our listeners how buttoned up you are from an ops and staffing perspective. The fact that you've figured out these core functions, this life cycle of a case, it's so crucial to the success of any firm. So kudos to you for getting all of this structured and figured out. And I love the way that you think about all of it. We were talking about intake and some of the drawbacks of maybe signing up a client and putting them through an investigative stage, and you use the term misconception. And I want to kind of harp on that word for a second. What are the most common misconceptions that lawyers have when it comes specifically to outsourcing legal work?
Sure. Number one is clients will be offended by talking to them. Huge misconception. My entire intake department, all 2,200 plus Google reviews I've retrieved have been exclusively retrieved by my virtual staff. And we also work with 225 law firms across the country in roles like intake and that scheduler role that I just described to you, and back end things as well. But they shouldn't talk to my clients is a big misconception. Number two, if I'm paying them less, will they care less? Huge misconception. These people are going to come in and be your hardest working people who care the most, the fastest. That's another huge misconception. Another one is that there isn't sort of that quality control layer to it. The way that we deal with that from a culture perspective and what we suggest our clients do is encourage your people that when they work for you, if they are 99% sure of something, don't. Wait, ask a question, and address things when you are 100% sure of them, which will allow for your documentation and training to improve. And then investing in documentation and training. I will tell you that in our first 3 years, there definitely have been some, unsuccessful placements on our side where we've learned to take more of an active role in the training process. Like, don't expect that the client's going to save a recording to a Zoom. Like, we should just do it. So not investing in training is the biggest downfall that we see. Just firm-wide, firms don't invest in training. And if you don't invest in training, then your intellectual property lives with very specific people. And if you're, a 5-person practice where you have one paralegal that's the source of truth on how we do a lot of things, and they get hit by a truck tomorrow, what are you going to do? So you have to look at everybody in your firm and be like, what if they get hit by a car tomorrow? What am I going to do? What if they get hit by a car tomorrow? What am I going to do? And if you need one, you need two. And these are all sort of philosophical ways that virtual assistants, if they are given a platform where they can ask questions, if they're given a place they can safely ask those questions, if they're given a specific person that supervises them on the task work, they're going to thrive. But if those basic fundamentals are not there, it's not going to work for you. So before you sign up with full-time virtual staff, you got to ask yourself, do we have anything documented at all? How do we transfer a call? How do we do this? How do we do that? All these fundamental things we were talking about before, these processes that we need to categorize as brain surgeon, sophisticated, essential, do we have them documented? So as you're going through the process, the next time your paralegal does something that's undocumented, flip on Loom, and now you have content to delegate that task in the future. So do I have things documented? Do I have the ability where somebody can come in and ask questions to a specific person? And are we willing to invest in someone's training? If the answers are no, you're not going to thrive with VAs. If you are willing to train on those things to make people 100% sure, it's going to work.
And the onus is on you, the law firm owner, to make sure that all of those things happen.
I think it's both. Our people come trained on intake generally. If we're going to help custom match somebody to what your problem area is, that may be someone that's done medical record retrieval, or we've trained them on it and we'll supervise them with you. But if you like give it to somebody who's some random supervisor and they're pissed, they're the ones that have to take on this workload, and it feels like work to them, not like a relief to them, it's not going to work.
Right. I know for us personally, something that's really helped with our hiring is we view the entire hiring process as not ending once they accept the position. It's 90 days post them starting, right? So we have a pretty robust like onboarding and training process, and the manager has to be providing 30, 60, 90-day performance reviews, right? So that for, and I'm just talking not as a law firm owner, as a marketing agency owner, right? But that for us has been a real big game changer, because it forces, if some of those things, all of those things, if they're not figured out, having a higher expectation and standard for what the first 90 days looks like will help fill some of those gaps along the way, right? If someone's still kind of unclear about, hey, how am I being graded in my role? What does success look like? Hey, when are we going to start having one-on-ones? Like all these things, making sure that there are regular check-ins throughout that initial 90-day onboarding process, I think is really, really important too.
Yeah,
I don't know how you guys...
There's the bond you have with your direct supervisor too.
Exactly. How do you guys view employee onboarding as, in this process? Like, is that something that you're still heavily involved in, or are you just kind of placing the roles and then saying, yeah?
So there's sort of two aspects. There's our internal practices, and then there's our, clients that engage us to give them full-time staff practices.
Right.
The internal practices are quite extensive in that first 90 days, from technical onboarding to how to do the job. We're a little more buttoned up in the firm than I would like to be even in a staffing company. And that's an active boulder for us right now to further improve the onboarding period of our staffing company. But it's critical. And, there's a balance that I take of, I like resourceful people. So there's a balance of like, go figure it out with here's where you're going. And it depends on the role I'm hiring. So for example, if I'm hiring a manager level or director level, like I want to give them less. I want to see them be resourceful and figure some of those pieces out. Whereas if I'm hiring just a receptionist, that's locked in and really clear what that person's going to do. So, it really depends on the role, on how much structure I put on that onboarding period. Like, here's exactly what you're going to do every day, because I kind of want someone to take ownership of that or not feel like they can't take ownership of that if they're in that higher level role. But it's a balance for sure.
What are the biggest mistakes law firms are making when it comes to hiring, and how can they avoid them? Is there anything that you'd recommend they add to their hiring process? Is there a step that most firms are missing?
Sure.
What would you tell firms that are looking to hire?
I'm going to kind of change my response to you. It's not directly answering your question. I'll get to it in a sec. But I think before I get to biggest mistake in hiring, I think that there's a huge issue in our industry of being afraid of firing and not having to hire because they're scared that they're going to have to put in work in the hiring. So I've seen this a lot where cultures allow, I actually just spoke on this at the HONA conference. If they allow what I call the mother, father, hen to stick around too long, and this is the person that maybe was your first paralegal and had a great first 6 months and then has coasted for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And they're just a pain in your ass on anything new or innovative you want to bring forward. Not firing that person creates a culture of negativity that sucks the wind out of a firm. So for me, I actually see the bigger issue than not hiring or mistakes through hiring in not firing and being willing to go back out on the marketplace to rehire for culture reasons. So that is something that I stick by. And I have, unfortunately, lately had to let go of a lot of the mother, father, hens in my own businesses. And it's not easy, but it's necessary. And if A players who have the potential to be an A plus see you tolerate someone that's been around a long time, who's doing D work, C work, they're going to become a B minus in due time or quit because they feel like they're not respected for their work. So before I get into hiring mistakes, it's really not firing is a mistake. And the hiring side, I think that the big mistake I see firms make is not being clear in what they're hiring for and just throwing people at a problem. So for example, like we want to come in and solve one problem at a time. We want to keep the roles very, very simple because we don't do paralegal placements. We do, okay, you need someone to do what? Where are you the most behind in your work? Oh, you are very, very buried on 500 medical record sets. Let's get one person in to just do that. So I think people keep hiring with this job description that is someone who will wear 100 hats instead of just taking one of those things off that sucks 20% of their time. That's a $10 an hour task, and focusing on more clear, less voluminous job type task roles, if that makes sense. So I think not being clear in what you know you need and just throwing more people at it, especially stateside people at it, where you're paying now what? To find a reasonably hardworking, smart person, 60 grand. You know, not very easy to find someone at 30 grand in the States for hard work right now. I think that's really the biggest problem in the hiring side.
I completely agree. One or a couple things that we've done and that I've recommended to businesses. Number one, in the hiring process at a project, like actually have them do something that's related to their role to see how they problem solve, see how they think. And then going back to what I said before, how we view hiring as it's not when they accept the job, it's 90 days post them starting their job, making language in their employment agreement that basically says the first 90 days of your employment here are a trial period. And, you know, depending on how the first 90 days goes, like you basically have to get accepted through this test phase. And if you're not, then it's just setting the stage for that. Look, if you come in here, you don't start performing to expectations, you're not going to have a seat here.
Yeah, it's sort of a probationary period.
Exactly.
However you want to frame it so it doesn't seem scary, but it can be scary if you're not good in that time. So
right. But it's the philosophy of hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
I think that
Gary V.
That's who I took it from.
Yeah.
I'm not taking credit for that one. Ethen, I really appreciate your time. I got a couple more questions for you. It would be a missed opportunity if I didn't ask about AI, because I'm sure you have a take on this.
Sure.
How can law firms integrate AI into their workflows to enhance productivity without replacing much needed human oversight and connection?
So I think it starts with that first exercise I started here today with. It's you need to know what data is going through your system. You need to overly simplify what it is that we do. We take, cut down trees and we turn them into paper. What are all those steps from a tree to paper that it takes for a client to come to us and for us to solve their problem, get them distributed or whatever practice area you do, and end that file? So oversimplify it on part one. And then the reality is, task work that my team does is the stuff that's probably the most ripe for AI. But if you are using your case management system as a free-form data ledger, not as a task list that knows what's next when you just accomplished something, you're never going to be able to utilize these tools because AI is not going to parse through your free-form, baloney in your case management system. It needs a real clear thing to be trained on. So give it that clarity first. So it starts today with, what are we doing? Is this brain surgery sophisticated, essential? Okay. Of these essential and of these sophisticated, what are some very clear product market fit solves? Because right now, just like with the .com bubble, every single application you can possibly think of for artificial intelligence, it's probably either there or close to out there right now, but can your system plug it in like a widget or not? And if the answer is no, it's probably because your data is a mess and because you don't know what you have to do every time you put a case through your system. So to be able to use AI, you got to clean up your shit. You got to clean up your system. That has to be flowing cleanly so that you can say, okay, labeling incoming documents, let's go find an app for that. I know one. There's Foundation AI that does that. But until you have it really clean, it won't work. So you need cleanliness of your data to be prepared to hire AI, and delegate until you can automate. Start the process of picking that one task. Hire a VA that can be an expert at that. And then in time, your VA can become the validator of the content on those menial tasks instead of doing it. So today is the age of training. Tomorrow is the age of AI plus human validation. That's where we are going. And if you're not positioned for that, you're going to fall behind dramatically these next 5 years. So, I hope that kind of answers.
Oh, it does. I'm having the same conversations with people right now. And just to reiterate what you said, it's number one, you need to have the data foundation in your practice. That's like number one. First off, are you tracking all of these things you need to be tracking? Is that data being structured in a organized fashion? That's like square one. And then square two, to your point, anything that AI is going to take over or automate needs to be preceded by process first. I see it. It's kind of the same thing with hiring that we were just talking about. Like, people throw other people at problems. Same thing happens with tech. People throw tech at problems too without the right pecking order of process and people, right?
So for example, you're a car accident firm and you want to send first party, third party letter of rep and or spoliation right when a case opens. Okay, great. So do you have the templates? Do you have the procedure? Do you have someone who's going to look over it before you click send? Or are you going to have a problem of AI sending shit work? Like, there's layers to it.
Agreed. Ethen, got one last question for you. I know your mission is to create over 1 million jobs. I wanted to ask how that vision came about and what steps you're taking in the short term and long term to achieve that outcome.
Yeah. So today we're at 800, which I'm pretty proud of. The mission of placing 1 million jobs and getting 1 million people justice, it had a ring to it that really stuck out of, I want to represent more people than any law firm has ever represented. And to do that, we also may create an impact of 1 million jobs. I've seen Amazon has placed close to 9 million jobs. And the legal sector is a really rare one where there isn't a real monopoly. I mean, yes, there's your Morgan & Morgans, but in the context of just business, they are nothing compared to what, some of the other industries of, cable and other consolidations that have occurred. And now with the change of law in Arizona, where non-law firms and lawyers can own in law firms, we're going to see a huge consolidation that will occur with highly effective, efficient shops using AI and using branding properly, where there will be a lot less of people who are doing it a lot better, which will get better justice for plaintiffs. It's going to be a good outcome on the whole for people. It will be a bad outcome for lawyers that don't adopt and don't set themselves up for what this next 5 years looks like, because it's going to be bloody in the legal space. Before I let you go, Bo, I know that was your last question. Do you mind if I talk about, a project we're working on that we're releasing in the next month or so?
Not at all. I'd love to hear about it.
So, like we talked about, a lot of our biggest failures with clients have been around really joint ownership of the training process. So what we saw as an opportunity is there's big issues in the call answering space, in the legal space right now. There wasn't a outcome-based product that's not by the minute, that had a model that scaled for all practice areas, that we saw, as a credit-based service based on what you want. I saw some where they would sign cases in the mass tort space. I saw some where they just do simple reception, or it's just inbound AI. So we built a product with basically EOL's intake team of 35 people is now being moved into Attorney Assistant for a new product we started called Intake 360, that today will be a team of contingency fee closers. We will start in the personal injury space and comp space, where we will do a credit-based inbound and outbound intake team based on the outcome. If it's a reception call, we have a credit-based service for that. If it's an inbound call that also happens to be an intake, we will get that person according to joint protocol with our clients, all the way to a signed contingency fee. And so it's basically a fractional intake department that can close clients. Longer term, we see it being a blend of AI plus humans, but we just don't like the quality of the AI yet. But we see a future of AI validated by amazing, basically salespeople in law firms. So we're taking our first client live next week, and we're only taking that client live in June. Then July, we're taking 5 clients live. And then in August, we hope to be able to really scale this. So we see this as a much needed product in the space of really a fractional intake sales team to bolt right onto law firms.
And this is a added product to Attorney Assistant?
That's right. It is different than our full-time placement. It is not a full-time placement. It is use it or lose it, non-refundable credits you will purchase on functionally. It'll re-up when it hits 40%. And you will be buying bulks of credits based on, our outcome. And we even have things baked into it like a no-show policy where we will credit you if a client doesn't show up, or a way that we will also bolt on getting Google reviews right after we sign up a client for your firm. So there's layers to it after a focus group we had with several clients on exactly what the product looks like. But we're really excited about the opportunity to have, more ownership on the quality of the product, because it'll be our team doing it, and a way that people can kind of dip their toe into the water, buy 100 credits, buy 150 credits, see if this is a fit. Let us spill over your phones to us, and it'll give people 24/7 high quality intakers.
Well, I think it's going to be a big success. I think it's going to appeal to the smaller firms that might not be ready to pull the trigger yet on a full-time hire. So it's more done for you than done with you, because it seems like the products now have a clear delineation where this is going to be done for you intake. And then once they build that up, the hope would be, okay, we have enough leads, we're investing enough in marketing, let's hire a proper intake manager or intake specialist to take some of this away.
And what we will give people in feedback is, hey, you used insert here number of credits. It might be time for you to get a full-time person. Here's your full-time person. So, we'll have that feedback loop with our clients. We see this as a product fit for not only our small clients who don't have the capacity for a full-time person yet, but also our first client we're taking live is a very big firm that has 7 or 8 intake staff, but they don't cover nights and they don't cover weekends. So they don't have the ability to close people in big windows of time, and they're spending tons of money in general branding. So there's also, on our focus group, we had a firm that was like, we just can't hire intake people fast enough or train them fast enough that this will be a sort of a stopgap so you don't have to hire like haphazardly functionally.
Well, that's awesome. Best of luck to you with that. I don't think you're going to need it. I think you're going to have a lot of success with that product.
Appreciate it.
Ethen, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. How can our listeners learn more about your businesses?
Yeah, so I'll give you sort of a blurb where people can get in touch with us, check out, what we're working on over here. At the end of the day, I'm like kind of a dork for solving law firm problems. Like I will yuck it up with you. I'm pretty liberal with my time, especially if you wind up hiring people from us. I also have a mastermind that's completely for free that people can join, and I give access to members of the mastermind to me. I host 1 monthly meeting with them. There's ways to get in touch with us, learn about what we're doing. But at the end of the day, I want to help you solve the problems in your firm, especially the things your team hates anyway. Let me know how I can help you think through these things.
Thank you again, Ethen. And thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of the Pareto Legal Podcast. We'll see you next time for another episode.